Well, welcome to Martin and Stian. It's really cool to have you on the show this evening, talking about all things climbing. And I think we're going to go quite broad on the topics because obviously with your book, The Climbing Bible, it's gone in with quite a bold title, which would give me the expectation that we can go in many, many different areas. But before we dive right into the book and start to pull out some of the good value items for everyone and what it's all about and your experiences and everything, can you tell us all a little bit about each of you as climbers and coaches? Because not everyone will have come across you yet. So tell me a bit about both of you.
Yeah, you can start if you want, Stian.
The youngest one goes first, right? All right. So, yeah, I've been on the podcast before, so a brief introduction should do. I'm a physiotherapist and a professional coach, and I used to coach the Norwegian national team. I did that for 5 years, and I've been climbing since I was 13, so that's like 25 years now nearly. And I started climbing with Martin, basically. So we met around the time we were 13, 14 years old. And basically, like, even though I went the physiotherapy direction, it's always been about climbing. But I was really outspoken on not going into working with climbing. So I wanted to go in a different direction work-wise and keep climbing to myself. But that didn't work out at all. So now I work with climbers as a physiotherapist. I work with climbers as a coach, and I work with Martin writing books, basically on climbing. So that's me.
Yeah. So Stian was not going to work with the climbers. I can say the same. I studied civil engineering and worked with that for a couple of years, and yeah, I have a really hard time sitting still. So a desk job was, it was not going to happen. I had to quit. So I started working with climbing. I started working with route setting. I built a few climbing gyms together with some friends that I now work at and own partly. And I also do quite a lot of coaching and write books with Stian. As he said, I started climbing like 1 year later. As he was 13, I was probably 14. And now I'm pretty old, 38. So yeah, I've been climbing for quite some years.
Yeah. And we've been competing and been friends for 25 years. So I think I said this to Martin in my speech at his wedding, that I would never be the climber that I am today without having someone to push me through those years. So Martin's basically been better most of the time, and I've had some years that were my turn to shine. It's good when you hang out with people that pushes you, right? So climbing wise, we competed at a young age. Never did really well in international comps. We went to some World Cups over the years. I'm a Norwegian champion in bouldering from 2009, so we've done all the national parts of competing. But basically, we've climbed mostly outdoors, developing and doing both routes of boulders. So, like, my claim to fame isn't that good, but some 8C first ascents and 8B plus boulder problems. So then I shoot the ball off to Martin because he has a more impressive list than I do.
No. No, but you said 8C, so if I just switch it to boulders instead of routes, then it's, yeah. No, but as Stian said, we always climb together, and we always had this like friendly competition between us. And when he is mentioning that he is the national champion like a bunch of years ago, then I have to mention that I was the champion in lead, though, like 2 years ago, I think, in Norway. That was actually like this PR stunt. When we released the Climbing Bible in Norwegian, we said that, okay, one of us has to take first and the other one has to take second. But yeah, Stian didn't fulfill his role taking second. No,
I failed.
Yeah.
And that was 2018. And then luckily, I beat Martin in the Norwegian Championships in Lead in 2019.
I don't remember.
so now we're back to square, and COVID had just cancelled all the rest of the championships.
Yeah,
so I'm never going back.
This year it was cancelled, huh? Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you've both clearly been through your own performance and progression cycles. You're not, climbing authors who have climbed hard for 2 years, coached a couple of people that probably got coached by someone else and said, oh, I coached a Norwegian, national champion. And now I'm going to write a book off the back of that. You've been through a long process yourself.
So I think like when we started climbing, I guess it was the same for you, but climbing was small, there were a few gyms and there were not that many people into it. So when we started climbing, maybe we climbed for 2 years and then we were 15 or 16 and we started as coaches for the younger athletes. And I think ever since we have both been coaches for either kids groups or like, better kids or now also adults. So yeah, it's been a long process for sure.
And how long?
Been a very...
How long have you both coached for in versus your climbing years? Have you coached also most of your climbing career?
Yeah, I think so. Like if we climbed for 24 years, probably coached for 22. But I mean, we had some years that we were living in France climbing and stuff, and then we didn't coach. But yeah, like basically all the time, I think. Yeah.
I think it's maybe something to do with the community you came into. When you came into climbing 25 years ago, it was quite small, and you were welcomed into this magical, mythical world. So at least how we remember it, then we got a lot of help and a lot of guidance from older climbers. So it felt quite natural to give that back when you sort of had climbed for 3-4 years, and some new kids came in that you tried to be as inclusive as you experienced everyone else to be when you came in. So I think like coaching without really realizing that you were coaching someone, we've done for quite some time. And then for me, it changed around a bit. I started working with Tina Johnson Hafsås, which is the Norwegian champion, like 10, 12 years ago. So that's where coaching also became a profession for me, something that I wanted to delve deeper into and educate myself in. But I think, we've had this coaching mentality, as maybe many of us do, in climbing for a long, long time.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was also like, I don't remember if you had it, Stian, but for me, I think it was my first job, being like 15 or 16, coaching the kids at Tyrili in Oslo.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can even call that coaching, but it was something. It was instructing.
But it was helping them with the technique and different stuff, So.
Yeah, interesting. Because I think there's not that many people that have got that kind of depth of coaching experience that I come across, and I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people that you can't just become a good coach by getting a qualification and reading, really intensely for 2 years and working with 10 clients. It just doesn't come with that. You basically can't buy it with money or qualification. And it takes, a really, really long time, which leads me onto the whole Bible thing. So first off, you obviously decided both to write this book, but why did you decide to write this book now or then, before you wrote the book, because you didn't write it today? And two, what was the choice on the title?
Yeah, you can take the first part, Stian, because you tend to tell
I can take the first part. I've been playing around with the idea of writing a book, because I took my coaching education over 2 years through the Norwegian School of Sports Science and the Olympic Center in Oslo. So I did my share of reading, both like in general athletics and sports, and also the climbing specifics. So I read the books that were on the market, and there was nothing in Norwegian, and I started developing education for coaches in Norway. And it, like, you picked the good parts from the book you liked, and you put it into an education system, and you tried to learn from it. But it was nothing in Norwegian, and I found it hard to go like to one book to find some really good stuff on physiology, and then to another book to find something really good on the mental part. So I wanted to make something that sort of incorporated all of these performance factors in climbing. And yeah, I'm a bit slower than Martin. So I'd spent like 1 year, 1.5 years just thinking through that this could probably be a good idea. And I went to visit Martin in Trondheim, and we went out bouldering, and I said, yeah, I've been thinking about writing this book about climbing. And Martin said, yeah, we'll write a book about climbing. And then from there on, it took like 1.5 years, and this book was born. Yeah.
Yeah, it's as Stian says, I didn't have this idea that I wanted to write a book, but it felt really cool to do something together with Stian, him being my best friend. And yeah, I had started working with climbing, with route setting, and having more courses, more coaching. And it felt like this could be something I can learn quite a bit from. Stian has more education than me within, training, physiology, him being a physiotherapist and everything. So I could learn from him, and maybe we could learn quite a lot, the both of us, from writing this book. Something I think we have.
Yeah. But where did the where did the title come from?
Oh yeah, this is we had the help from an editor who is a climber in Oslo. She was helping us with the text and also what to include. And at some point in time, she said that you just need to make this book into a Bible that contains everything. And then I think I thought about it for a week or so. And then I think I asked, why don't we just call it the Climbing Bible or Klatrebibelen in Norwegian? And I think in the beginning we were just, that'd be cool. And then we were like, could we really do that? Is that okay? And I think it's okay.
So now it's okay, but I think like we have more street cred in Norway than we do internationally, right? So it didn't feel that pompous. Like we sort of had it. We sort of had enough skin in the game to call it the Climbing Bible and make a laugh at it in Norway. And then it gets translated to English and a lot of other languages as well. And it's like, well, that sounds really fucking cocky to call it the Climbing Bible.
We're not scared publishing it in Norway, but publishing it in the UK, that seemed really scary.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the nice things that happens with hindsight is that once something actually goes well and people like the book and they like the content, and you get a publisher elsewhere and you get your book known, is that then it actually just becomes a reference point to other people, as long as it was good. And in a way, you can see it with hindsight of being, well, if it flopped, no one would even know that this thing called the Climbing Bible flopped, because they wouldn't have noticed it because it flopped. So actually, I think it's like often good to be bold and go in big. And I think that approach often actually just generally in life pays off quite well a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's like with the 9C test, it just goes viral.
Bold.
Yeah, people loved it when we did that interview with Stian about the 9C test. Oh, we had so many emails and comments about that for at least a month.
Yeah, I was listening. I liked it.
Yeah. Okay, so going into the book and sort of thinking about what's in it and the stuff that you go through in there, I know a really important part for both of you was to talk about this whole balance between sort of fun and play, and how that kind of pitches into this whole performance and progression element of climbing. Because a lot of people, when they see progression in climbing. They see it as being something that's like serious, and it just because you're progressing, it needs a new approach. But I think you obviously sit in a place where you feel like this whole fun and skill and play part of it fits in a really important part in climbing. Can you tell me a bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can start. For me, it stems a bit from when I coach younger athletes going into competitions, because for me, I came to climbing from other sports, and climbing represented something else, something new, something adventurous, something more fun-based, something that you wanted to go and do. No one told you what you do, what you should do. You just wanted to go climbing. And it also gave us all these adventures on going outside and meeting lots of cool people. And then you come into a position where you are supposed to coach people into performance in competition. So like you're 14 years old, you haven't been to any other sports. So your sports ambition is climbing. And it's supposed to be that serious because professional competitions are very serious. So it's like, how can you coach people into performance without killing maybe that magical, mythical part of climbing that I really fell in love with. So, and I think also with climbing growing as a sport, then more and more people come into climbing just as a sport. And maybe they miss out a bit on what it has to offer when it comes to just playing around on a bouldering wall with your friends, either outside or indoors. So just to have that section in the start to see how much fun it's possible to have, even though you're a very serious climber. I mean, just take a look at the best climbers in the world. They have a lot of fun going out climbing, even though they're really, really serious about what they do.
Yeah, and I think also that, I mean, it depends a bit though. I guess physical training can also be fun. It's quite, I mean, I think it's really fun to do hangboarding if I do it with my friends and we push each other somehow. But especially maybe for technique. I mean, when we go bouldering, Stian, we always make our boulders, and if you fall, I laugh a lot. And then we, like, afterwards, we always discuss, and like try and picture what to do. And should you go fast? Should you go slow? Should you pinch it? Should you like crimp it? How to hold the holds? How to stand? Everything. And to me, this seems like play and fun, not so much training. And it seems like a really good setting to learn technique, I guess.
And you also see it on outdoor climbing as well, that like 15 years ago, there weren't any climbing videos out. Like there were, but not YouTube or Mellow or whatever. It was like you had the real thing. And that was like the one fun movie that existed, right?
That's whatever.
Yeah, that's a classic. But now people look at the videos, they know what to expect when they come somewhere. Like if you go to South Africa for bouldering, you could sort of like make your own tick list that you want to do before you go, and you know how many people has done this and this boulder, and you know all the beta, and you could just train very serious and you could tick it off very fast and have that as a credibility. So I'm not sure if more people should like not go and watch the climbing videos for beta and leave like that performance. How fast can you do a boulder or a route? Leave that aside and then play around more with moves and beta and where to go and get all these experiences that really helps you grow as a climber.
I saw this movie of Tomoa Narasaki in Hueco, and I don't think he did a single boulder. He was just jumping around doing double dynos and doing one arms on the edges and stuff. And yeah, he didn't send anything, but he had a lot of fun. And he's super strong. Huh? And I have to give it to you guys that Lattice, especially Lattice combined with the Wide Boys, because Lattice, it's this science-based training programs and all the good things that you do there. But the combination with Wide Boys and your seller and you and Pete and Mari just being down there having fun and making up stupid things with gas masks and everything. That's a good combination, because if you can keep that fun and that playfulness in climbing and still train hard and have fun with that, I think you can become pretty strong or pretty good at climbing.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure on that. And I think there's another element for me that goes almost hand in hand with the fun part of it. And this is where, especially if we're talking about like longevity in the sport versus just like burning bright for 3 years and then burning out. Because I think you can actually do very well with very little fun, but you'll probably burn out. Is I always try and foster or promote an attitude of learning and like curiosity with the athletes that I work with or people that I mentor and I think I like that bit of it because it's different to fun and it sits in a different place for people. But what it does is it promotes people into a system of questioning and feedback. Because if you're always hungry for learning, even when you have bad sessions or a bad time with a boulder or you couldn't do a fun challenge, you'll go, but what did I learn from this? So I had the pain of the failure or the micro failure, but what did I learn? And if you can get really good at this process, you have every day of your life where you walk away and you go, I failed, but I learned. That's great. And it actually really works very, very well in the long run. And I think those two, for me personally, go very well together. If you can get both of those in a sweet spot for any athlete, they'll go a long, long way.
Yeah, I think just trying to keep that inner kid of yours. When you see kids that are really psyched when they come to a climbing wall, they never stop. They just climb, and you give them a task or a challenge or a boulder problem, which is very close to what they can do. Then they won't back down until they've figured it out. And that's basically what we're trying to do in climbing as well. Just keep on working that that process and have fun while you do it. And there's this weird assumption that training shouldn't be fun. But in climbing, I think training should be fun. Keep the motivation high. Like you say, Tom, keep them in the sport for a long period of time. Look at a total different sport. Look at 100-meter dash sprint with Usain Bolt. It seems like the guy that has the most fun out there on the track and field. So I think it's important to keep that.
And what have your experiences been like as coaches with periods where either yourself or with others that you've worked with things like those kind of burnouts and just losing the love of climbing and it's just not there for people again? Because I've seen it plenty of times over the last 20 years. How have you kind of worked with that, and what have you seen get people back into the sport again? And what have your experiences been like?
I think my experiences with that would be mainly with competition athletes. There are outdoor climbers who experience this as well, but for my sake, it's been mainly with competition athletes. And I think taking them outside and making them climb on rocks so they have this other arena where it's not that much based on performance all the time. I think that helps quite a lot, especially for the younger climbers that I've trained. Yeah,
I think what I've tried to do a lot is to highlight all the different aspects of climbing where you have to improve, especially if you're a competition climber, but also if you wanna be a good outdoor boulderer, for instance. I think there's something unique about going to Font and going to Switzerland and going to South Africa and being able to climb at the same level in all different styles. So that takes away some of the really high end performance part that very many people chases. You could do an 8A in Switzerland, but you can't do a 7A in Font. Why is that? What do you have to improve to do that? Maybe you should take a step down from that very narrow tower of yours of just doing a harder boulder or a harder route, and see if you can progress on all these other parts, which can give you so much joy to actually solve a puzzle that's challenging regardless of the grade. And just with indoor indoor training, to see many kids, maybe especially boys, that perform really well on the steep physical part, but then they train with the girls on the slab and they get smacked. So like, yeah, go and do more slabs. I mean, if your goal is to be a complete climber, then there's so many aspects you have to cover. So you can't just be that local hero in the gym that can do the hardest boulders on that wall. You should be able to do all the boulders in the gym, and then you can say you're a good climber in that gym, and then you go to the next one and the next one.
I think when you're getting really old, you can choose your arena. I can climb roofs. I don't have to be flexible.
When you're above 40.
Few more years.
How do you break it down in your with the book, with your kind of emphasis that you put on, you know, because it's a really broad book and it tackles a lot of different areas. How do you deliver or draw the reader into that, you know, that psychological side of climbing versus the technical side of climbing versus the physical side of climbing? Because we know they're all very important, but you've got to cover everything, really, haven't you, here?
That was the goal, to cover up everything. We tried to pinpoint some important performance factors. So we split it into technical, physical, mental, and tactical performance factors. And started off with the technical bit. I don't think we say it explicitly in the book, but like that's the first chapter, the technique part, because that will take you very, very far. And then obviously you can't write about everything in depth, so you have to take the bigger picture here and look at what most people will benefit from. So I guess people with a lot of climbing experience might be a bit disappointed on not having enough detail, but I think for most people there's enough detail, hopefully, to start working on it.
I mean, the aim was to make a book that had something for everyone, but more for the beginners and intermediate climbers than the more advanced. So yeah.
And how do you, because a book is a really passive thing, like it's not like you're having a conversation with, you know, the reader and you get some feedback process. So what does your process look like for teaching technique in a book? Because it's a real challenge to do that.
It's a real challenge for sure. Yeah, I think you need 2 books. We just wrote a follow-up, and quite a lot of the reason for that was that we felt we had to exclude quite a lot of the exercises for technique in the first book, just because there wasn't enough room. We wanted to cover the theory behind it, and we included some exercises, but not all of them. But it's very hard to explain technique in a book for sure. I think like the 3 main things that we ended up with was balance and tension, or like direction of force, and also like the
weight transfer.
No, but like the dynamic and static movements. And we feel like those 3 is kind of included in all movements. So we used quite some space to cover those. And then we tried to explain the specific techniques later on, and also what techniques would be good to use on different styles of climbing. So, but like the second book that's now out in Norwegian and being translated to English now, it's probably going to be published by Vertebrate in fall. It has quite a lot more exercises, and like it was funny to watch now because suddenly Johnny Dawes is back on YouTube, and he's also in our book, and we wrote that like probably a year ago before he ventured back into YouTube. I think it was on Epic TV or something, and like Stian and myself, we went on a course with Johnny Dawes when we were like 15 or 16, and it seemed like complete bullshit. We just wanted to know how we could get stronger. How can you pull harder on the crimps or the monos or whatever. And now we are actually trying to teach the same things, because people, they go into the gym and they just try and do the hardest boulders there, pulling as hard as they can. But maybe they could just go in there and try and climb, maybe not being allowed to pinch the holds, because pinching the holds, it will make them, then you can put the center of gravity out from the wall. So you can climb technically worse, but compensating with power. But if you're not allowed to pinch the holes, you have to climb technically more correct. Or maybe you can learn some pretty good balance from climbing with just one finger or one hand, or maybe without hands at all. So yeah, Johnny Dawes was the man 25 years.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, there are some fundamentals in movement that we tried to cover. And then again, you can't really read a book and be a good technical climber. You have to go to the gym or go outdoors and start to practice it. And when we tried to explain it, our editor, she is a climbing geek, really, really psyched. And she's also like a 7B plus lead climber. So she knows quite a bit of climbing, but her feedback was always, if I can't understand this, then you need to find another way to formulate it. So yeah, it's in one way, it is a passive process, but we got a lot of feedback whilst writing it as well. And all the things that are very well formulated and very clear inside your head, they're not very clear to other people when we put it on paper. So especially that chapter, we spent a lot of time on trying to make comprehensible so that you could understand it. But then again, you won't be a better climber by just reading a chapter on technique. You have to actually want to improve, which is why we tried to make the book inspirational with stories and pictures, so that you read it and you wanted to go climbing. Then maybe there's a higher chance that you actually remember what you read.
Okay, so here's a question. What do you think is more effective at delivering improvements in technique, volume or intensity?
I think volume. I think a lot of climbers climb on way too hard intensity all the time for training technique. And that was kind of the mission with book 2, I think, to make people go to the gym. And if you have to train on double dynos, if you have to train on the dynamic parts of climbing, find a jug and then just do on a vertical wall, or maybe even a slab, and then just do a double dyno to a hole that is a jug and it's 30 centimeters above, and just focus on the timing in the movement. Try and lower your body, start the movement in your legs, go a bit out to be able to pull yourself in, try and dead point a move, all those things. So I think we all climb way too hard all the time instead of focusing on doing it the correct way. I guess you all heard about how the Japanese train, but they just do the moves over and over and over again. And even if you can do it, your movement might not be the perfect one. So why not try and find the perfect movements?
Yeah. But then obviously there's a problem with that. Even though I agree with the volume part, that people should climb a lot more, and if you climb more, then the intensity needs to go down. But it's so easy to cheat when the climbing is easy enough, right? So especially indoors, if you do a boulder with positive holds and you're strong enough, then you could cheat your way up, physically. So climbing gets technically harder when the holds get worse. So you could either be very focused in your technical training, so you know that you're climbing on easier stuff, but you just try to do it over and over again to learn some sort of technique. But then you won't be really challenged until you can't pull on the holds. So it's not always easy to train and to work on technique on easier problems. You need to be very focused. It needs to be some sort of deliberate practice. And I think you could do that in so many ways in climbing through your warm-ups, for instance. Instead of just doing the same routes or same boulders, you try to do the boulders over and over again in different manners, and see how that challenge you.
Yeah, it's funny you both put those across, because I would definitely say I'm a sit in the middle kind of guy. That I think both of those sort of like almost they achieve different things and they have a different process associated with them, but they're both really important. And I always feel like the fatigue element is a really nice little feedback system to play into people's training, because basically it's like a negative feedback, is in, if you don't have good technique and you don't move efficiently, the feedback is you get more fatigued and you suffer. So it promotes you into climbing more efficiently with time to stop the suffering or the discomfort. So it's like a little feedback loop that can lead you into slowly getting better with things. But they're all individual, parts of the jigsaw as such.
I don't think that there is a sort of like a black and white answer in any sport, in any technical sports. I mean, just look at alpine skiing, especially the slalom part, a very technical sport. I mean, you could obviously do a lot of volume and do all the slopes in really low speed, but then you don't have to do the turns in the same way in low speed as in high speed. And the same in climbing, that it's only when you come up into that intensity where you actually have to do it technically correct, where you feel your flaws. But then I think it's important to take a step back and realize what you did wrong and what you need to improve, and then work that through volume, well rested, well focused, and then put it back into the intensity part.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably a bit different if you're kind of a beginner or intermediate climber, or if you have climbed for a long time as well. I mean, maybe the more intensity climbing comes into the more advanced climbers.
And how do you sort of deal with in your book and with you as coaches this often kind of, I guess, obsession with or sometimes often or with the certain group of people, and I'm going to say broadly speaking, it's heavily weighted in the male front and the younger male front over everything is solved through the physical element of climbing. They seem so much less engaged with, the tactics or the psychology or the movement economy, any of those things. How are you trying to tackle that through the book as well, or is something you do more just in person? Because I think we all sense it as coaches.
Yeah, I mean, within training groups, if you're lucky enough to have a good training group and you've created a good environment, then you could start to team up people deliberately. So like have the guys and the girls climb more together. And very often at least with younger athletes, then we tend to see that girls, they climb better technically. So they can make that experience happen for the stronger guys, that it's not all physics, right? And then I think it's easier for a weaker climber to look to a stronger climber and say that he can do that because he's strong. But if a stronger climber looks at someone that's definitely weaker physically and see that he or she actually performs better on that type of climbing, then that's an important message to come across. I know you, Martin, you've taken a lot of the youth that you coach outside where the holds are worse, the feet are worse. You can't really rely on the physical aspects in the same way as indoors.
I live in Trondheim, so I'm not so sure, but yeah, it's always positive holds here.
Yeah.
But yeah, now it's it's hard. I was thinking about this earlier today, and it's so many, or we had talked a bit about this as well, Stian, but so many of the kids today, and especially the guys, I would say that their technique is really good when it comes to dynamic movements and coordination. I think like the indoor setting today promotes that quite a lot. We tend to use slopers and bigger holds and bigger moves. I mean, we didn't grow up with that, Stian, so we know the balance and the crimps quite a lot better than the slopes and the coordination stuff. But it's Yeah. I think the setting, I mean, the route setting is quite important when it comes to this. And of course, the guys, they want to train the physical parts and the dynamic parts instead. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard to like write it, to put it in writing.
We didn't put this a lot in the book. I mean, we explained the different parts, but we didn't like address the different types of climbers.
But I mean, climbing, when climbing gets harder, then the holes get worse. The wall angles tend to get steeper. So obviously the physical part is important. But then again, there's so much to climbing that you can be a very technical and smart climber and outperform a lot of the strong ones. Maybe the young male athletes need something very clear to actually show that, to show them that you need more technique than just only the physical part. So yeah, take them to fun, or have them do the slabs, or take away the positive edges and the positive feet, so that if you don't have anything to pull on, you can't really rely that much on technique anymore, not on physique anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends on what they want as well, though. I have friends here who are super psyched on the 100-kilo challenge from Tom, or posted it. I don't remember, but yeah, it's quite fun though to train these measurable physical things as well. And of course, the climbing here in Trondheim is really physical, so here it helps to train those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, in our generation, it was always important to be good in all disciplines. I'm not so sure everybody thinks like that now.
I think things often go around in cycles, though. They just go through like phases and cycles where certain things will become very popular because it was convenient at the time, or there was improvement in knowledge, or, you know, facilities or resources. And then before you know it, like the top of the pyramid where the best people are, there's too many people at the top of the pyramid, and they all go, well, we're all training in exactly the same way. Where's the next edge? And then a few people start to address psychology, for example, and they suddenly see a big breakout of 3-5 people at the top because they are very strong, but also psychologically very, very elite. And people go, oh, what's the difference? They'll see it working. And then suddenly for 10 years, everyone's fascinated with the psychology of performance. And then everyone's great at that, and something else isn't quite as good. And it like, it cycles around.
We asked you these questions earlier about, not today, but an earlier day, about the training philosophy in England. And you need to answer that, by the way. But I also asked some friends who are from Japan. And one of the other questions there were, I mean, what would you consider the most important, like the technical, the physical, or the mental part? And they would say the mental part, because you always bring your mental game to training, to competition, to outdoor bouldering. So for them, this is the main thing. And yeah, it stands for like all the other. I mean, if you're going to have a technical session and you're not prepared mentally, if you don't have the correct focus, you're not going to do well. You have to be kind of playful, and you have to be curious, and you have to maybe discuss with others and watch film on what you're doing and all those things. And the same with the strength training. If you're not ready to pull really hard, it's not going to help you get any stronger. So yeah, I think maybe the mental part is going to come back.
Yeah, I think there's a fair bit to be done on that front, for sure. And book 3 for you.
What's that?
As a book number 3. It's gonna.
No, we actually, yeah.
Oh, we thought we were having a sort of a writer's break, but that didn't really work out.
No.
It didn't work out at all. So yeah, we're deep into another project, but that will just probably be in Norwegian, I guess. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done on the mental part, and that's the thing. Like we talk about these performance factors as equal, but in practice we don't really treat them as equal. So it's so much easier to watch a YouTube video or Instagram of a physical training protocol and to follow that than it is to actually take in what's mental training in climbing. How do you reduce stress? How do you bring your what is your mental game? Like all these things, and there's no science to back this up in climbing. Like we're too young of a sport to actually say that. So we try to extrapolate from other sports as well. But I think we can pull some lessons out from other sports and bring into climbing and try to put some words to the paper on what are these mental factors that you should try to work on, both with younger athletes, but also for us oldies. Like there's always something you can bring to your mental game that will probably improve your climbing a lot more than adding a kilo to your fingerboard routine.
Controversial comment.
We'll see.
Let me just look at my chart.
Yeah, no, you need to start selling training methods for mental training as well, now, Tom.
Oh dear. No, we did actually. We spent a fair bit of time looking at psychological profiling, and I spoke to a number of really competent people in this area about it. And I think my conclusion so far is that, like you, I felt like it was very young in the game still. I felt like it was still quite vague about where and how the methodology would be deployed and whether we have practical work that could be done on it. And at present, until someone makes that leap, it still feels to me like a good coach understands intuitively how to work with an individual to improve that side of their climbing. And we intuitively know it, and we can be really effective with that. But how we put it down on paper, or how we create, a system or rules or whatever it might be, I think that is a little bit, or data as well, a little bit further down the line.
Yeah. And like throughout that chapter in our book, we didn't really try to build a model or a method that should work. It was just that this is sports psychology 101. Like if you go and read the sports psychology science, then these are some fundamental theories and methods that has been researched for many, many years, and then see how are these applicable to climbers. Not saying that you should follow this or this method, but like how to reduce stress, how to reduce anxiety, how to lower and raise your arousal level depending on what type of climbing you're on. I mean, you could take all these practical bits and see if they fit in without calling it like hard science or data. But like you say, you've experienced it yourself. You've seen it in so many athletes. Like I guess we've all fell at one point or another after the crux, or been at the crux, or the rest before the crux. One day feeling really pumped, the next day not feeling pumped at all, and nothing in your physiology has changed over that week. It's just something else was there. So trying to put some names on what are those things and how can we work on that, because that doesn't really take any physical effort. That just demands that you're present and keep working on it from day to day.
Yeah. How do you deal with injury in the book? Do you sort of go for, again, a try and tackle all areas and all injuries that commonly come in climbing, or do you try and take a more preventative approach of trying to share your experiences of how to avoid injury, or is it about rehab as well?
Well, that's my department, more or less. But I think for me as a physiotherapist, it was really good to work with Martin, because I think I would have gone way, way too deep in that part if it hadn't been for Martin. And like in all medicine, it's quite
injuries, so, yeah.
Yeah, you're always injured. But I mean, there are very few black and white answers in medicine and in sport prevention. And sort of, I've spent 15 years as a physiotherapist, and you don't really want to say anything bombastic about anything. So you sort of just get lost in all the small details. So Martin really helped me put that more into an understandable form, which meant that we couldn't really try to tackle every single injury that people can possibly have. So we split it into we split it into sort of these overload injuries. After taking a quick look at the acute injuries, then it was more to how do you manage load? Because if you want to improve in any sport and also in climbing, then you have a risk of injuries. You can't really put that risk down to zero, but you can mitigate it in many ways. So if you have an overuse injury, you should do something with the load. And from my perspective, then people aren't really that interested in managing load. They just want to fix something and have their pain gone or whatever. It's like, yeah, but you've done 25 hours of training this week, and 3 weeks ago you did 10. So you have like a 15-hour increase in workload over those 3 weeks. And you could try to fix a person's pain, but it would be like cleaning up after Chernobyl with a Q-tip. It doesn't really make any difference, right? So we try to focus on what I see as most important, which seems to be load management. And then you could also obviously add some psychological variables into who gets injured or who has more pain, but we didn't really write much about that besides talking briefly about what pain is, because that's also a very wide subject that we had to incorporate.
Yeah, and what do you mean by that?
By pain being a wide subject?
Yeah.
Well, you could, when you have patients in your clinic and they come in and they say they have pain, and you ask them, what does pain mean? What is pain? Then it's you get all these different answers. And then from a scientific point of view, then pain is an unpleasant experience, basically. So you can experience pain in the absence of any injury, and you can have severe injury and don't experience any pain at all. So just like seeing, then pain is an experience, and it's very subjective and it's very real to the person who has pain. But it's not this clear correlation between tissue damage and pain that people seem to think. So we come from a tradition where we try to treat pain as something that we should avoid all the time. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, that you should just go all in, but a lot of the time we constrain ourselves too much. So you start to feel some pain in the finger, so you avoid climbing for 3 weeks, and there's no pain because you don't load it. And you go back to climbing and it's painful again, obviously, because you haven't loaded it in 3 weeks, and you've been obsessed with this one painful finger for 3 weeks, like waking up every morning to check how it is, how it feels, can I touch it? And then you go back to climbing within 3 weeks, and like the first hold you grab is like, oh, is it painful now? Is it painful now? And yeah, of course it's going to be painful. It's just like go home on your couch and start to see how is my right knee now compared to what it was 10 seconds ago, and it would be different. Mm-hmm. So to talk to people about what pain means is quite important, I think. If you talk to athletes and ask them, is it possible to succeed in this sport without experiencing pain? Then everyone would say no. So, all right, how do you handle that? You can't go around being and have pain all the time. So, but yeah, you learn how to handle the different types of pain throughout a climbing career. So you know when you should stop because you've been through it. Like you've been through the joints and the pulleys and everything, and you know that's a different kind of pain than what you get from hand jamming and from overuse injuries. So you know how to act on those different signs of pain. So that's why that was a very short, but maybe too long monologue.
I think it's a really interesting area. And I think naturally with the fact that we deal with other people and they're highly variable on this topic, it makes it a very tricky zone with dealing with people, because you're absolutely right. One person, or rather two different people with exactly the same injury or same issue can talk and respond in a very, very different way, whereas physiologically there might be a very similar thing occurring with the injury.
Yeah, and I think the biology is important, right? We know that we need to mechanically stimulate tissues to make it heal properly, right? So even after pulley injuries, you need to load maybe faster than people think, and throughout an overuse injury, you also need to load in some way. You just need to find different ways on how to load. And if you have a loading related pain symptom, then obviously it's going to be painful to load it. So we can't really use pain free as the standard, because you just paint yourself into a very narrow corner that is very hard to come out of. So you need to understand why it's painful and what you can push on, and expose to load in a way that builds confidence. And I think we come from a medical tradition where pain equals harm. So you should just stop and not do anything. And that seems to put people in a whole lot of more trouble than if we could explain what pain is and how we could expose to load.
Yeah. Actually, on that same sort of, I think it is related to this somewhat, but it's also another tricky area, and it's related to injury as well, or at least perceived injury risk, is how do you both feel about youth climbers and youth training and fingerboarding?
You want to start, Martin?
Yeah, we discussed that quite a lot, but I'll let you fill in quite fast, I think. We were quite strict when we wrote the Climbing Bible in Norwegian. We said under 16, you shouldn't do any fingerboarding. And when we wrote it in English, correct me if I'm wrong, Stian, but I think we said then that the loading will be the important part. And I mean, the kids, they are climbing on the steep boards. They are jumping to small crimps on the wall. And I think fingerboarding seems very safe. At least for me, not being a physiotherapist, it seems very safe to hang there still static if the load is not too high. So, I mean, you can take load off your body weight. You can hang with your body weight, or when you're getting stronger, you can add some extra weight. And it's still going to be a lot safer than jumping to small holds in the climbing wall. But then there is this you can fill out, Stian, but when they are growing quite a lot, you have the big risk there. So maybe we need to be aware when they are in this period of time.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote it, the first edition, which came out in Norway in 2018. We were quite strict, and then I think that was maybe a bit that we were scared to open up too much, and then just that discussion created a lot of thought. We talked a lot about it with other coaches, and
we didn't want to write it in the first edition, but yeah, as you say, we were just too scared not to write it. Yeah.
Then we adjusted, because it's like when you start to resonate about it, it's like asking a 15-year-old alpine skier or soccer player not to do squats to build strength. And when you see what these kids are doing at a bouldering wall, and then say that you can do that, but you can't do a controlled dead hang, it doesn't really make sense. Mm-hmm. So yes, you have the epiphyseal fractures and the risk as they grow, and the growth spurt, and they put on weight, but they still climb. And no one has said anything about going to the spray wall on 45 degrees or the moon wall and do crimps for 2 hours. So I think we need to come to a place where we see that the training method itself, it's not dangerous. It's how you dose it, obviously, which is the case with any form of training.
And I think as well, maybe the climbing style, if we could control the climbing style, and this is way out of my area, so correct me, Stian, but I mean, you had these injuries when you were like 15, I guess, and I didn't have them, and I was always the static climber, and you were the super dynamic one. And the kids today, they are so dynamic. They are jumping as crazy to the smallest crimps, and to me, that just seems way more riskier than climbing a bit more controlled when they're on the board. But yeah, I don't think there's been any, like, people hasn't done any research on this, I guess. I haven't.
It's a pretty hard technical topic to do research on. Like you're 14, you go to the campus board and you do all the jumping on the moon wall, and you guys, you do the hangboards. So no, but I mean, I think the dynamic bit is one part of it. Is like you said, from all of us that trained together when we were kids, I was the only one that had epiphyseal fractures, and I wasn't the strongest, and I wasn't the one who trained the hardest. You were all stronger and you trained more. But I was the one who had it. So obviously a lot of genetics comes into it as well. But yeah, I think that, like, over the past 3 years that I've changed my mind, not a lot, but I've been more outspoken on that. I think that fingerboard and hangboarding is okay. But obviously you need to manage the load.
But it all depends too, though. I mean, if the kids are going to climb competitions, because at least in Norway, I don't know how it is in the international comps, but we are not allowed to set small edges and crimps for the kids. For the oldest category of juniors, we can set it, but not for the younger ones. And I mean, they will need to be able to climb on slopers and volumes, not crimps. So it doesn't matter that much maybe for them to do the hangboarding routines. And the reason to do it, though, would be strength training. It's a good way not to get injured. So yeah, maybe they should do it.
Yeah. It was interesting to hear you. Yeah, you say that, because I've definitely faced a lot of battles on the fingerboarding thing with juniors, especially like 4 or 5 years ago, where it was a lot of more of a tricky subject with a lot of coaches, and got quite a lot of pushback, especially from European coaches on that front, and they felt really uncomfortable with it. But we've certainly seen we've been using fingerboarding now really consistently for a good 7 years now with juniors, and injury incident rates have gone down by a long way with finger injuries. And I definitely see a big positive impact doing that fingerboarding, but we're not going totally mad with it and just hammering people with, high intensity sessions 5 days a week, and, using exactly the same methods that we might use with a senior who's been already climbing for 10 years or fingerboarding for 5 years. It's that dosage thing and the appropriateness. But certainly they do high quality work, high intensity work. And it would have definitely been seen as 10 years ago as in that risky bracket, and people wouldn't have liked it at all. But we haven't had issues with it. We've seen everything opposite to that, lots of benefits.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a lot of research in other sports on youth athletes that we know that strength training is good. It is a preventive measure that we should use as coaches. So why shouldn't we use it on fingers? It's like you wouldn't put a 14-year-old with no previous history of strength training into doing like the heaviest deadlift with poor technique. But it's not the deadlift itself that's dangerous. It's how you do the exercise. And at some point, these kids are going to go to the fingerboard and go to the campus board anyway. So they should learn the proper technique, and they should learn how to manage the training load and how to dose it properly. And I don't really see that as a problem. But like you said, it's been a tradition of just saying no. And then at some point you need to start questioning why. And then going from there to actually be outspoken publicly on that subject, which is often scary. But I also see the trend that it's more and more acceptable now, luckily.
Yeah. Okay, last main question from me. On the topic of training and climbing and performance and getting better and everything that you've written as authors, is tell me about this book number 2. I know we've kind of alluded to it a little bit in this interview, but what's the book called? What's it about? It sounds like it's out in September, October or so.
Yeah, did you speak to Wordpress? They said so? Or
I don't know.
Oh yeah, okay. No, it's supposed to be out in the summer, fall, I guess. They're translating it now, or our friend Bjorn Satan is translating it. So it's called the Climbing Bible. I guess the Climbing Bible Practical Exercises. That's what it's called in Norwegian.
Very catchy English name there.
Say what?
Yeah, very catchy English name.
Yeah. We had some other suggestions up, but we ended on that for some reason.
The New Testament.
Yeah. But yeah, we went into it a bit, and it's 3 chapters, and it's all exercises. It's exercises for training technique, then the different fundamentals like balance, dynamic, tension. And it's a chapter on physics, but then on strength and explosive exercises. And we tried to keep most of those exercises in the wall. There are some isolated exercises as well, but mainly exercises to do in the climbing wall or on the board. And there's also a pretty big chapter on kids, everything from games to technique drills, and also physical training for kids with a fingerboard.
Cool.
And yeah, and like for the kids chapter, I find that training kids is a bit different when they are quite young. So we tried to include those exercises where you can like sort of individualize it to the different climbers, but also like activate the whole group, you know, because there's always a bunch of kids running around. And yeah, if you just if you have an exercise where you have to follow up this one kid, then the others are just going to be doing something completely different. So yeah, we try to keep those exercises that fulfill those 2 targets.
So, I mean, when you write a book, then it's pretty obvious that you kill a lot of your darlings throughout that process, especially when you try to include the amount of subjects that we did in the Climbing Bible. So we could say that the Climbing Bible is more principles on different subjects, and then we saw that we needed to have we need a catalog of exercises at some point, just to give people something more concrete to work on when they went to the gym. So that's sort of like how the method part of the Climbing Bible was born, to gather all these exercises. And then it's challenging writing books because now the Climbing Bible is 3 years old, and we should probably revise it and change things because your knowledge gets updated over 3 years, and the same will be for this next book as well. I mean, the exercises will still be good, but maybe we think differently on how to dose them, or what is the best way to do strength training, etc. But that's just, then we have something to do over the coming 10 to 15 years, just going into revision.
Yeah, well, that sounds really great. But people always like that blend of, or if it's not a blend, it's the other side of, you know, theoretical versus practical and actually doing something. So it sounds like you're going to deliver on that.
That you bring to the gym just to get inspiration to try new exercises, you know, and the other one will be the one that you read at home to understand the theoretical parts and get inspired to go train, you know.
Yeah. Oh, well,
but I guess this is familiar to you as a coach as well. Like you really want people to understand the principles, because if you understand principles, then you could sort of adjust and individualize your own methods. But obviously it's very good just to have that. All right, these are the methods. You can go and try these, instead of like, yeah, but he told me that strength training should be done in this and this way, and then you need to think it out for yourself. Then just here's the guide.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's just about sharing, you know, your knowledge and experience as a coach, and trying to get that across in a way that you think is valuable to people, really, isn't it? Because it's, I think that's always an interesting thing with, you know, we're all in-person coaches and we work with people just one-to-one, and that's very natural because we've done it for so many years. But then we also have this other bit where we give away that passive stuff, whether it's something that we're trying to write on social media or something we're trying to put across in a video or in a book. And when we give that stuff out there, it doesn't come with that normal feedback one-to-one thing. that you get in the normal coaching process. So in my view, I think it's much harder than normal coaching. I think it's a much harder, because you have the quality of the flow of resource outwards is only one direction. So it has to be so much better, and you have to cover more points and give more context to everything, because you can't have a question back to you. It's
your coaching becomes way better after trying to write those things.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, Martin and Stian, it's been really great to chat to you this evening about your book and the forthcoming book, and all things about climbing and what you see as being, the areas that people should look at and improving in. I think it's great what you're doing, and I love seeing any coaches anywhere in the world that are passionate about all this sort of stuff and trying to help other climbers get good. It's really cool. Where can people find the book? For the UK, I know exactly where, and I'll put the links into the description below, which is through Vertebrate Publishing in the UK. But elsewhere in Europe, in the USA, where can they go?
They basically have to go through Vertebrate now. Okay. So that's what we know. It's getting translated into Spanish and French. Yeah, the French edition is out actually, so you can buy it in France. Yeah, and some more countries as well. But I think if you're in the US, I think you need to order it through Amazon UK or through Vertebrate. So go to Vertebrate, give them a high five, and say thanks. Thanks for helping us out.
Yeah, Vertebrate, they're amazing. They're great guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Where do people find you as well on Instagram? What are both your handles?
My name, Stian Kristoffersen on Instagram.
Yeah, Martin Mobraten on Instagram.
Cool, wicked.
Very creative. Not as creative as the book title.
Is there a at Climbing Bible on Instagram?
No, we had one in Norwegian, but it sort of just died out. I mean, we can't keep up with you lattice guys on the social media parts. We just we just laid down, and we'll just write another book instead.
Yeah. I just go free diving at the moment, so I just want to post pictures of that, no climbing related stuff. So yeah, now we're bad at social media.
Oh, brilliant. Well, absolutely brilliant chatting to you both. And I'm sure we'll catch up very soon.
Will do. Thanks, Tom.